All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Christine McCall with 9 Sigma. I'm your event organizer. I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon for our CCEMC Grand Challenge webinar. This is a part of the 9 Sigma webinar series, so we do appreciate you attending, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So today I'd like to welcome our webinar speakers. We have Denise Resnick, who's the Vice President of Strategic Programs for 9 Sigma. We also have Kirk Andrews, Managing Director for the CCEMC, the Climate Change and Emissions Management Corporation. And we also have Eloise Young, a Program Manager for 9 Sigma. So before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Keep in mind that this session is recorded. So it will be archived and available on our website after the session is concluded, and we'll also email it out to everyone in attendance. And also, if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to type them in your chat box. We'll do a live Q&A at the end of the webinar where we'll all answer your questions with Denise, Kirk, and Eloise. So please follow along. Again, any questions, feel free to type them in, and we look forward to speaking with you after. Denise, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. Welcome to everyone. For those of you who are not as familiar with 9 Sigma, what I'd like to do is first introduce you to 9 Sigma. We are the global leader in open innovation services, and our mission is to connect organizations like the CCEMC with external innovation resources and to accelerate innovation in private, public, and social sectors. So many of you know us for the RFPs that we are often known for. And if you look at the screen right now, you'll see that at 9 sites, you can find those RFPs. You can also find feature galleries, like the one that's shown there from Johnson Controls, where a client will list lots of different needs. And then we also host Grand Challenges, which is where our focus is today on the CCEMC Carbon Challenge. I hope that all of you have logged into CCEMCgrandchallenge.com. If you are already registered on 9 sites, you can actually post questions, submit your proposals, and actually gather more information directly from our program manager who's responsible for this challenge, which is Eloise, and you'll hear more from her in a bit. But even as a visitor to CCEMCgrandchallenge.com, you can move throughout this site, learn all about the Grand Challenge itself, what the process would be for submitting, the timeline and schedule for each round, and there are multiple rounds and opportunities to engage. And if you look at that Community Support tab, there's a chance to see questions that others have asked that you might find relevant, or to ask your own questions. And then on the News and Media tab, you can learn about other events that are going on, conferences where we'll be attending and talking about this challenge. And then also, so for example, this webinar will be posted on that News and Media tab as well. Okay. And so what I'd like to do now is shift our focus to this Grand Challenge, which is addressing the world's carbon. And Kirk is going to present some background on how this challenge came to be and CCEMC's leadership in this area. Kirk?
Very good. Thank you for that. I think it's important that we start with a little context to give a backdrop to why we're even initiating this at all. What is important to know and recognize, I think, is that the world has a greenhouse gas challenge, and much of that is stemmed from human footprint. It's driven predominantly by global population. The world population today is 7 billion and growing, and it's expected to be 10 billion by the year 2050. So the world needs energy, and it needs all kinds of energy in all kinds of form. And with growth comes demand for those energy products. The International Energy Agency predicts that fossil fuels will continue to be an important part of the energy mix going into the future. And even as we build out renewable technologies, fossil fuels will continue to be an important part for years to come. Within the context of Canada and Alberta, Canada is a natural resource-based economy. We have tremendous fossil fuel resources. We're the only non-OPEC country in the top 5 for proven oil reserves. And energy development is an important part of Canada and Alberta's economic future. We fully expect to develop these resources, but to do so in a very responsible way. Canada is a signatory to the Copenhagen Accord, which is a commitment to a 17% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2020 against a baseline of 2005. Alberta in Canada is Canada's largest source of emissions. 60% of Alberta's emissions are industrial, and of that, 70% come from what we call a large emitter. So while our energy intensity is improving, the absolute amount of emissions are growing as we continue to build out our economy. Next slide. So a little bit about us, the Climate Change and Emission Management Corporation. We're an Alberta-based not-for-profit. We operate independently of government and industry. We're aligned with public policy, and Alberta's public policy is to achieve a greenhouse gas reduction of 50 megatons by 2020 and 200 megatons by 2050. Our business is to provide ongoing and dedicated funds to support the discovery, development, and deployment of clean technology to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Where we get our funding from is from a levy on Alberta's large emitters. And they have a performance target they are expected to hit, which is a 12% reduction against a 2005 baseline. And for every ton that they exceed that limit, they have to pay $15 a ton into the fund. We finance projects all along the innovation chain from early stage R&D ideas all the way out to deployment. To date, we have funded 48 clean technology projects that have a combined value of nearly $1 billion. We have enjoyed some success, but we are now reaching out to the global community. Next slide, please. So the question is, why a grand challenge? Why would we do this? Next slide, please. Well, why? I think because it's different, because it expands our reach well beyond the borders of Alberta and Canada. It's a global initiative. The challenge that we want to undertake is compelling, it's goal-oriented, and it's competitive. So the bottom line from our perspective is that a grand challenge is intended to deliver real greenhouse gas reductions in a very innovative way. We expect to be able to attract new and novel ideas and technologies from all over the world. We want to advance transformative technology, and we really want to accelerate the commercialization. It typically takes quite a while to bring these ideas from nurturing the bright idea to the point of commercialization. And we want to encourage technical solution providers to work together. And I think that's a big role for 9 Sigma to help to connect those various communities. And lastly, and very importantly from an Alberta perspective, is that this offers the opportunity of building out a whole new economic sector. Next slide, please. So when we thought about this and were wondering what we would do with respect to the Grand Challenge, we considered in the context of the energy life cycle. And this schematic describes what that life cycle is. The CCEMC is already heavily invested in the area of exploration. As I mentioned, 48 projects valued at $1 billion. We asked ourselves, what could we do that would be different, that's not redundant with a whole bunch of activity that's already occurring, and that could contribute significantly to our mandate. Today, most of the focus is on mitigation to minimize the generation of greenhouse gas emissions, but we decided we wanted to focus in on the areas of conversion and on use. So what could we do to convert CO2 into something that could be potentially used? Next slide, please. So the Grand Challenge is indeed just that. CCEMC is committing up to $35 million Canadian in funding for technologies, innovative technologies that look at converting GHG emissions into useful products. So why would we want to do this? Well, Alberta is, as I mentioned, Canada's largest source of emissions. We obviously have a significant supply of CO2. It's in great abundance and will continue to grow. We needed to look at changing our perspective on this. We wanted to look at carbon as a resource, as an asset, and figure out what ways we could actually use it. We don't consider it to be a waste. We consider it to be, as I mentioned, an asset that has the potential to build out a new area in the economy. Next slide. So what do we expect these technologies to do? Well, as stated, transform carbon from a waste material to an asset. That's absolutely critical, and that's a 180-degree perspective from the way we've typically looked at this. And then with respect to the outcome, we've given ourselves a goal that we wanted to significantly and absolutely reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the conversion and consumption of CO2 emissions, and the target is at least 1 net megaton annually. So the net is quite important. You need to consider the energy that is used to produce your product in addition to the emissions that are being saved, and we're looking for a target of that 1 megaton. The intention here is to create new carbon-based value-added products and markets, and whatever the technology is, scalability will be a very important factor. And what we mean by that is the ability to move from bench scale research to commercialization with broad applicability to different types of manufacturing processes. The greater the levels of potential use, the better. We will certainly like it. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we're talking about, I'm going to give you just a few examples. By no means consider this to be an absolute list, because it's not. It's simply some possibilities. We don't know what we don't know until we find out. So some possibilities are converting CO2 into useful materials, such as chemicals or potentially building materials. You can think conceptually about the generation of, let's say, 2x4s that are built with carbon fiber. Secondly, would be converting CO2 into easily transportable forms, such as solids or trapped gases. And thirdly, biological processes that could convert CO2 as well. Think of things such as the use of algae. Next slide. Over to you, Denise.
Actually, I think it's over to me. This is Eloise Young, and now that Kirk has done a great job of introducing the background for the Grand Challenge and what the ultimate goals are, I'd like to talk a little bit more nuts and bolts. What actually is the structure for the Grand Challenge itself? So on the next slide, you'll see we have the Grand Challenge covers a 5-year period. And these 5 years are broken up into 3 rounds, which you can see down the left-hand column of the slide. Now, across the top, we have each round is broken into 3 phases. We're currently in round 1, phase 1. And the open submission period to receive proposals to this Grand Challenge is through July 15th, 2013. So you have until July 15th of this summer to submit a brief, 4 pages or less, non-confidential, top-level summary of your idea. the goal here is to really lower the entry to playing into this field. And we're not looking for a heavily documented, highly detailed proposal. We just want to get a sense of what your idea is. Now, of all of the submissions that are received, the ones that are best aligned with CCEMC's ultimate goals will be invited to submit a much more comprehensive proposal, which is Phase 2. And Phase 2 will run through the fall. The final phase of Round 1 culminates in the announcement of the 20 winners of the $500,000 Canadian seed grants. And this announcement, although our calendar says March 2014, we've actually moved this awards event into April of 2014. And so that process, starting from now all the way until the awards event in April of 2014, represents this first round, where we're looking for bright ideas. We're looking to provide some seed grants to help develop them, and if they are conceptual, get them to some sort of an early stage. If they are more developed, help move them along onto the next stage of development, etc. Rounds 2 and 3 will take us through to the end, where Round 2 results in 5 awards of $3 million Canadian grants for development. And then Round 3 culminates in the announcement of the final award winner, a single winner will win $10 million Canadian as a commercialization grant for their technology. And so this represents the slightly complicated, but the overall arc of this. And I'd like to emphasize that right now, we're really interested in hearing about your idea. So if you have an interesting idea, put pen to paper and submit something that is less than 4 pages long that shows how your idea or your already developed technology can help lower the GHG footprint in the world. So on the next slide, you'll see the criteria by which your submitted proposals will be evaluated. And they're pretty straightforward. There are 5 of them here, and the first one is the greenhouse gas benefits. So what is the potential of your technology to affect an absolute reduction of greenhouse gas emissions? Now, for those of you who are putting forth a conceptual idea, obviously this will be your best guess, but hopefully you will have some scientific rationale as an underpinning for this estimate. And for those of you who have slightly more developed work, you will have early stage results that you can use as evidence to support what your projected GHG benefits might be. The time frame, of course, is to be able to demonstrate a conceptual idea within 2 years and to move a more developed idea to the next stage of development within 2 years. Another criteria is that the technology that's being proposed must be suitable for use in Alberta, Canada. Now, we've received a lot of questions about this through email, through our Grand Challenge forum at our website. And I kind of want to just reiterate what it is that we are saying to everybody who asks the question. Suitable for use in Alberta means that technology that's being proposed must be implementable in Alberta, Canada. So, for example, if you have a novel strain of algae that can produce monomers or produce bio-based fuels, well, as long as those algae can be grown in a controlled system in Alberta, then CCEMC would love to learn more about it. On the other hand, if you have an idea to develop a new strain of plant that only grows in tropical climates but can consume 10 times more carbon dioxide than a non-engineered plant, that is not something that would be implementable in Alberta, Canada. So the technology that's being proposed does not have to be developed in Canada, in Alberta, but it does need to be implementable. So 2 other things that a submitted proposal will be evaluated for is what kind of a business model is being proposed. So the goal, of course, is to find a way to consume carbon. That means that the products that are being developed must be ones that will have a market. And so a business model could be something as simple as projecting what a carbon fiber textile market could be for textiles that are made out of the hypothetical carbon fibers. Impact. So as Kirk said previously, the goal for any individual technology is to be able to ultimately affect a 1 megaton net reduction in GHGs. And so that is the impact that winning technologies have to be able to, if not demonstrate, at least show a clear path towards. So we've been talking about 1 megaton, and I suspect that many of you who are in our audience today probably have a good sense of what 1 megaton of carbon dioxide is. But I think for a lot of the general public, this isn't the case. And we've put together this very fun infographic to kind of help people get their heads around, well, what is 1 megaton? What can you make with it? And how much space does it take up? So as you can see here, it takes up as much space as approximately 68,000 basketballs. It also takes up about 500 cubic meters, which is the size of an average home in Canada. Now, what could you make with 1 megaton? Well, the carbon that is represented in 1 megaton of carbon dioxide could be converted into almost 3 million diamonds that are the size of chicken eggs. Pretty cool. You could also use it to make 20 million carbon fiber pens, or the seat frames for 50,000 passenger cars, which of course would make those cars actually have a smaller carbon footprint because they would weigh significantly less than cars that had seat frames made out of steel. So this all kind of folds in on itself, and it's a pretty cool thing to think about. I'm going to switch this over back to Kirk now and let him talk about the judging panel so that he can describe. I've described to you the evaluation criteria, and the judging panel is part of the group that will wield that criteria.
Thank you, Eloise. What was really critical from our perspective was to ensure that we received objective advice on the selection of the appropriate technologies, and that through that process we would position the initiative as being highly credible. So thus we went with a model where a third-party judging panel was an important part of the overall program. So our judging panel is comprised of leaders in their respective fields that we intended to get a broad diversity of perspectives in multiple disciplines and years of experience that could come to bear on the subject matter and the discussion of relative technologies. The specific purpose of the judging panel, of course, is to advise our board on the selection of winning projects in each of the rounds, and to serve as ambassadors of the initiative, which they've agreed to do. They are quite engaged in this and are really excited about the prospects of the technologies that we might receive. They also are potentially have the ability to provide cross-industry networks and resources to assist us, given their presence in various marketplaces. I will also point out that in addition to the judging panel, we also have a technical review group that it's comprised of highly educated and experienced people who are bringing their technical knowledge to bear to review the very specific requirements of each of the technologies. The judging panel itself. So I do want to highlight the individuals that are on the panel. We think that they are exceptionally good. Elise Allen is the president and CEO of GE Canada. GE, of course, is known as an innovation company worldwide. Michael Brown is co-founder and chairman of Chrysalix. which is a venture capital outfit. They're based out of Vancouver, Canada, and have a presence around the world. They're actually one of the largest VC firms that are in the business of clean technology with respect to greenhouse gas emissions. Howard Herzog is a senior engineer. He's with MIT. Clive Mather is or was formerly the CEO of Shell and has since taken on a variety of other roles. He's also was one of the members of the Premier's Council here in Alberta for Economic Development. Very pleased to have Honorable Anne McClellan on our judging panel as well. She is an extremely well-known Canadian, highly respected, and was the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada when the Canadian government was Liberal. Richard Sandor has joined us. He's chairman of the Environmental Financial Products. And lastly, Dan Wicklum is the Chief Executive Officer of COSIA, and COSIA is the Canadian Oil Sands Innovation Alliance. And it is an alliance made up of about 20 of Canada's largest energy companies who have reached a cooperative agreement to build out technologies and do fundamental research to enhance the environmental performance of oil sands and oil sand development.
Okay, thanks, Kirk. So, we've talked about why a Grand Challenge. We've talked about what the Grand Challenge is. We've talked about what the structure of the challenge is and how proposals will be evaluated and by whom. So now the final thing to talk about is you, the audience. Why should you guys be interested, and why should you guys think about submitting something? So there are a couple of reasons, and I think they're all really good ones. First of all, this represents access to patient capital. And what that means is that this is money that is specifically being given out for the purposes of developing ideas, getting ideas from the idea stage to the commercialization stage. The CCEMC is willing to wait. I mean, the Grand Challenge lasts 5 years. That's a pretty long time. So this is something that is not all that common. The opportunity to go all the way to commercialization, to implementation, that is not something that a lot of funding groups are frequently helping you towards. And the CCEMC is providing this help through a whole ecosystem of support. So in addition to the outright monetary grants that will be provided, there is a whole wealth of other things and contacts and networks that are being provided to participants. So there will be access to venture capitalists, to technical mentors, to business developers. This represents the sort of advice, the sort of outside expert panel type information that a lot of startup technologies don't always have at their fingertips. And this really represents part of CCEMC's commitment to ultimately commercializing the best technologies. Additionally, the CCEMC, they're providing this patient capital to better the world, to develop technologies. They are not interested in owning intellectual property. They want to make sure that you can exercise your intellectual property in Alberta, Canada. But other than that, it's your property. And then finally, this is the visionary aspect, the aspirational goal of the Grand Challenge, is to be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, not just in Alberta, Canada, but globally. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Denise Resnick, now.
Okay. So what we've done is really highlight a lot of information today that you will find on the Grand Challenge website at ccemcgrandchallenge.com. And I hope that through this verbal overview that you can now go to the challenge site and hone in on the information that you're looking for specifically. In order to receive updates, view the questions that others have submitted, join the community, it is important that you actually register at the CCEMC Grand Challenge site. So certainly you can peruse the site, get information, but in order to join the community and receive information in a real-time basis, it's important that you actually register. So I ask each of you today to take that action, to go to the site and to register, and that ensures that you will receive the most current information as it is available. It is also important when you go to the challenge site that you actually follow the challenge. So you'll see on the screen, right in the top right, along that top bar, once you register, you can also click Follow the Challenge. And so that actually spurs the updates that you will receive directly. There are other places where you can follow the Grand Challenge. So you can tweet it, and so we put the hashtag site there. And we also are featuring the challenge at 9 Sigma's Planet Earth group, which is a LinkedIn group. We're going to have some time for questions today, but if after today another question comes to mind, please register and use the community support. So you can see here we've provided that link, but you will also see that on the community page. You will see it at the bottom of every single page. And we have an entire team of experts here, led by Eloise, who will respond personally and directly to all of your questions. If it's a question about registration on the site, a question related to your specific technology, the applicability of it, or what kinds of information should you include in your 4-page summary, timelines, anything related to the challenge itself, we are happy and eager to respond to.
All right, thank you, Denise. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and open it up for any questions. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, please type them in your Q&A chat box. They'll come through to me, Christine, and we'll discuss them with Kirk, Eloise, and Denise. So we have our first question here. We indicated that the submission should be non-confidential. This may limit the quality of the submissions. Will the judging panel sign a non-disclosure agreement and or a conflict of interest agreement? Can you provide assurances that novel ideas submitted will not be shared with third parties?
Great. I'm so happy that that is the first question, and I always like to say to people that I will actually put money on it that would be the first question. So I really appreciate that coming in. So first of all, if you've ever worked with 9 Sigma before, you'll know that our policy is only to receive non-confidential information. And we actually have a lot of information on the site that will coach you in best practices so that you can highlight the quality of your concept without sharing any confidential information. And clearly, we don't want to receive anything that's confidential because we don't want to in any way contaminate anybody with your concept or to create any kind of inadvertent disclosure. So I just want to address that. First of all, if you're uncertain about how to present yourself in the best light and create a non-confidential document, we do have those kinds of support materials on the site ready and available for you. The second piece is related to the conflict of interest and non-disclosure. So when you register on 9 sites, if you look at the terms of use, you will see clearly that we will not share that information with any third parties. And you will see that, again, we protect that information and intend it to be, and protect that all the way through the process. All of the judges have actually signed confidentiality and conflict of interest documents. So the judges are also held to that very high standard. And then the third piece of that, can you provide assurance novel ideas will not be shared with third? So as I said, you'll see in the terms of use that we will not in any way share any of the material with any third parties.
Great. Thank you, Denise, for walking us through that. Another question we have from an audience member is, will the evaluations include an assessment of the energy cost per megaton of product?
So I think that we're going to let Kirk answer that one. Kirk, what do you think?
Yes, it will be a consideration. When we look at the greenhouse gas emissions associated with our normal RFP process, we look at it from a variety of different perspectives. One is the tons that are being achieved. Secondly, over what time period, and typically at what cost. So we want to understand what the cost is, but we appreciate, and you ought to appreciate, that depending on where you are in the innovation chain, the cost of delivering tons can vary. So if you're early in the R&D stage and we are basically estimating what might be possible from this technology, typically the costs are estimated to be higher at that stage than they are when they're out at the deployment stage. But yes, it would be a consideration.
Thank you, Kirk. Wow, we have a lot of questions coming in. This is really great. We appreciate your attentiveness and your interest. We have another question here. Are Alberta-based submissions given an advantage? Are there any advantages to being a Canadian company?
I'll answer that again. No and no.
Thank you. All right, another question.
So let me just support that to say that the intent here is truly for this to be a global challenge and to bring in the best ideas from wherever they come.
Great. And next question we have is, can one company submit more than one application for their different technologies for the Grand Challenge, or is it one per company?
So that's a great question, and actually we've gotten that question several times, and I'm glad to be able to answer it to this wider forum. The answer is that one company, if they are so blessed as to have 5 unique different approaches, is welcome to submit 5 different proposals. So what we're interested in seeing, though, is not 5 proposals that are different flavors of the same ice cream formulation. We're interested in seeing 5 unique approaches. So if you have distinctly different approaches, by all means, you are welcome to submit a different proposal for each one. If you choose to do that, I strongly encourage you to call 9 Sigma and talk with us so that we can help step you through the process.
Great question. Thank you. Is there a specific format for the 4-page submission?
Another awesome question. So at our website, you will see, if you go to the CCEMC grandchallenge.com website, you will see that on almost every page there is a Respond Now button. And next to the Respond Now button, there is another button that is smaller that you can click on to download the response template. Now, we strongly encourage everybody to use this template to fill out their proposal. The reason that we would recommend this is because we are trying to help you. If you look at the response template, you will see that it guides you to provide the different pieces of information that the CCEMC is looking for.
Could you elaborate on how those responses will be evaluated? Sure, Kirk, Denise?
Sure. So all of the submissions will be collated and brought to an evaluation team. That team will be assessing all of the submissions. Again, we're talking about the early, 4-page submission. All of those will be evaluated according to the criteria that Eloise discussed today, and which are, again, noted in more detail on the Grand Challenge site. So no need to remember them. There's a ready resource there. Again, you'll see in the template that those questions are brought to the fore. So the intent is for you to bring forward the information that match the criteria so that the assessment team can identify the proposals that are the most compelling that also align with those evaluation criteria and objectives. The proposals that are most closely aligned will be invited to submit a more complete proposal submission, and then those the proposals that rank most highly from that second round, from the second phase, will be brought to the judging committee.
Great, thank you, Denise. I have a question here from a gentleman, and hold just one moment. More questions came in, and I was just about to read it. Are there CDN or ALTA tax implications in funding a foreign-based firm?
Kirk, over to you.
I'm not even sure I understand the question. So you might have to help me out there, Denise and Eloise. So repeat that. Are there what?
Are there Canadian or, I'm not sure what ALTA is, tax implications?
Alberta, I suppose.
Okay, Alberta implications in funding a foreign-based firm.
Not to my knowledge. There aren't, and we're certainly prepared. I mean, beyond the Grand Challenge, we've been in business now for 3.5 years. We run normal RFP processes. We have certainly spent money and invested money in technologies that are not Alberta or Canadian-based, and we have had no issues with that at this point.
Thank you, Kirk. Next question. And again, we appreciate all your questions. Thank you so much for sticking around for our Q&A. Do we start the process work from isolated CO2, or must we include isolation from an industrial or environmental source?
That's an excellent question. The answer is that depending on what your project is proposing, that you can just go and buy a lecture bottle of CO2. You can order one from a gas supplier. You can go to Target or Bed Bath & Beyond and buy one from SodaStream. You know, if your technology is all about conversion, worrying about how to get the CO2 is somebody else's problem. Now, ultimately, what we would hope will happen is that as technologies advance through these 3 rounds, somebody who has a great way to get the carbon dioxide from the emission source to somebody who would use it might actually form an alliance of sorts with somebody who has technology that can use that collected carbon dioxide, creating an end-to-end solution. Now, that's what we hope will naturally evolve as technologies advance through the various rounds of funding. But for this initial stage, you do not need to have a complete solution.
Great, thank you so much, Eloise. I just want to jump in real quick. This is Christine, and remind everyone that the webinar was recorded, so everyone will have access to the archived recording through email, and that involves the audio portion and the slide portion of today's session, and also will be made available on the CCEMC Grand Challenge site as well as 9sigma.com. Another question we have here from an audience member, can you stack more than one of these grants, for example, Grand Challenge with other CCEMC grants or other government programs?
Kirk.
Well, I hope I understand the question. If you apply to CCEMC for the Grand Challenge with a specific project in mind, and you also apply to CCEMC through one of our standard RFPs, and you actually your project actually meets the condition of another RFP, you can actually apply in both areas. But at the end of the day, when CCEMC makes its choice, we will only fund your project one time. We will not do that twice. So you might want to make a choice about which one you're most interested in at this point in time. Now, with respect to matching monies, because our money comes from government, our interest in leveraging that is to to attract other resources other than government money in the Canadian context. So we're not going to match Canadian government money with our own government money.
Oh, okay. So, Kirk, if I could just ask you to restate that so that everybody will sort of understand that from all the different angles. So what we've heard you say is that if somebody has compelling technology and they apply to both a CCEMC project and to this grand challenge, and if the project were to be eligible for funding from both sources, the proponent can only select one source of funding from CCEMC. In other words, they can either get funding via the Grand Challenge or via the standard CCEMC project funding, but not from both CCEMC funding sources, correct?
That's correct, provided we're talking about the same project. They're entirely eligible to submit to both processes with different initiatives, and they could be successful in both of them.
So now the second part of the question, Kirk, is that if somebody already receives either provincial or Canadian federal funds for technology, and now they are applying to the Grand Challenge, can the if they win, if they are advanced through to become one of the 20 semifinalists, can those funds be accepted and used in combination with provincial or Canadian federal funding?
Yes. But on the understanding here is that our normal process is a leverage process where we typically require at least a one-to-one match, and it's typically private sector dollars that are matched against ours. In this case, in the Grand Challenge case, we are not requiring a match. Right. So any other resources you bring to bear that will help you advance your technology are readily acceptable.
Thank you very much.
So for just as an example, if someone has funding from SBTC, that can be used in conjunction with funding from this program as well.
That's correct.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to scroll back up and just go through a couple of more questions. So we have someone in the audience that has an idea that involves a future Alberta company and would capture the carbon from their own process and using their own product. Is it necessary to develop the capability to export the carbon capture system to other emission sites?
Well, I confess that, this is Eloise, that I'm not entirely sure what's being asked because it sounds like the proposer here has technology and they're asking if they need to develop further technology that would allow them to export their carbon capture system to other emission sites. And I think that certainly for this first round, the goal is just to simply show that you can convert the carbon into whatever is the client's product, whatever is this proponent's product. Future iterations might involve expanding that technology into wider, sort of that full cradle-to-grave type reach. But Kirk, do you have any thoughts about that?
I think a couple. Again, going back on our core mandate and what we're in business to do is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions here in Alberta and more broadly in Canada and the world. Our interest is to see the technologies discovered, developed, and then deployed, and we want people to be able to commercialize their technology because we want it to be applied to as many applications and as many facilities as possible. If we can take a single technology that's tested at, let's say, a facility, and then have that broadly deployed into hundreds and hundreds of facilities, that's what we're interested in. So scalability is important, and so is the potential for market penetration. because it equals lots of tons for us. And back on point, I mean, that's the return on investment for us.
Great, thank you. And that seemed to answer the gentleman's question, so thank you very much, Eloise and Kirk. Another question we have here is, if you form an alliance with another participant, does that entitle both companies to move to the next round?
So this, actually there are really several questions that are involved there. If you are one of the 20 winners of a seed grant and you choose to form an alliance with another one of those 20 companies for the purposes of submitting a proposal for the next round of funding for the $3 million development grant, then it is certainly going to improve your chances, but it is not a guarantee. So when I say it is likely to improve your chances to advance to the next round, I say that because likely you are doubling the amount of resources that you have and you are providing a broader technology reach. Now, obviously, it's the alliance then that is applying to the next round. So the alliance, which is comprised of both companies, would move together and to the next round to share whatever funding they might win. Kirk, do you want to add anything to that?
I don't think so. I think that was a good answer, Eloise.
Great. Great. Well, we are approaching the end of our session. If you have any additional questions, you can always visit the community support section on the CCEMC grandchallenge.com site and submit your questions through there. We'll take one more question from the audience, and then we'll wrap it up. So we have a question here. Does the carbon captured in a proposal necessarily have to originate from GHG emissions? And there's a second part to that. And how about capturing carbon before it becomes a greenhouse gas?
So let me start by emphasizing that the goal of this challenge is not about carbon capture. The goal for this challenge is to convert captured carbon into useful products, to consume the CO2 that has been emitted by other sources into things like, you know, carbon fiber pens, diamonds, you know, you name it, carbon fiber reinforced eye bars. So the technologies that are going to be considered compelling are ones that are involved either in the direct conversion or consumption of carbon-based emissions, or ones that are enabling technologies, such as technologies that allow carbon-based emissions to become more readily transportable. So a proposal has to have more than just a technique to capture carbon, and in order for it to be considered at all by the CCEMC.
Great. Thank you so much, Eloise. And we're seeing that the session was most beneficial to our audience members, so thank you for that message, and we're glad that you guys have found this session to be helpful. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We are approaching 4:30. So again, thank you so much for everyone who attended. Again, the session was recorded and will be made available to you within the next couple of days. So you'll have access to the audio and slide portions of the session. And again, we encourage you to check out the site, ccemcgrandchallenge.com. So thank you so much to Denise, Eloise, Kirk, and everyone who attended. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.